reading today is from the book of John, chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. May God add blessing to the reading, hearing, and living of this holy word this day.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated.
As we go through life, there are many different people who call our name. And it's amazing to me just how many different messages can be conveyed to us simply by the way that someone says our name. When we're growing up, our parents call us by name. Sometimes it's done in a very calm and gentle and loving manner. Other times, and you know this, especially when they use your full name, it conveys a completely different message. And I can tell that all of you have had that experience. And then when we go to school, our teachers call our names. And sometimes this conveys a sense of dread to us, especially if we're unprepared. But sometimes also it can be to receive some sort of award or accolade. However it is, we have different ways of hearing people calling us by name. And then as we go through life, oftentimes a spouse or significant other comes into our lives and they call you by name. And your name on their lips can melt your heart or cause you terror. This morning, as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, I want us to look at the first person that Jesus spoke to on that first Easter morning and how he spoke her name. And I want us to discover what it meant for her when she heard Jesus call her, but even more importantly, I want us to think about what it means for us today. So you just heard one account of that first Easter morning in our scripture lesson from the Gospel of John. And you can look at the other Gospels and see other renditions of this story. And all of those differences in those just depend on which group of people were being addressed. But it is amazing to me that the very first person that Jesus speaks to on Easter morning is a common woman that we don't know a lot about. We do know that she is the Mary that Jesus earlier had cleansed of demons, and that in her gratitude for that healing she had chosen to follow Jesus. We could even use the word disciple. And she also, we are told, provided financial support for his ministry. Now, we know that Mary is the one who hours earlier had been at the foot of the cross. She was there when Jesus spoke to his mother and to the Apostle John. She was there when Jesus' body was taken from the cross and wrapped in linen and laid in the tomb. Mary was there for all of that. She had experienced some life-changing experience and event in her life because of Jesus, and she was devoted to him, and so she must have been deeply touched in a way that we might not understand by his death. And now it's early in the morning, and Mary goes to the tomb. A couple of other gospel writers tell us that she had gone there with some other women to properly complete the burial process with Jesus' body. They brought spices with them. But we know from this rendition that when she got there, the stone had been rolled away and the tomb was empty. And so Mary runs back quickly to the disciples and she tells them what she's seen, and they come running because, of course, they don't believe Mary, and they return to the tomb and see that it is indeed as Mary had said, that Jesus is no longer there. And without any conversation at all, the disciples then, it tells us, go back home. But Mary stays. She remains at the tomb sobbing, weeping, distraught. We don't know why she stayed there. Perhaps it was that she just could not tear herself away. And we know that there were two angels that appeared to her. And we also know then that Jesus appeared. But in her grief, she could not recognize who he was. In fact, she thought he was the gardener. Maybe she couldn't see through all of her tears clearly. Or maybe his resurrected body had some sort of different appearance. And even when he first spoke to her, she doesn't recognize who he is. But we shouldn't be too surprised that Jesus wasn't recognized by Mary. After all, it's clear from the scriptures that the disciples really didn't understand about the whole resurrection process and really didn't understand what Jesus meant when he spoke about needing to die and come back in 3 days and all of that. And it wasn't surprising, or wouldn't be surprising, that Mary wouldn't have been thinking that there was even a possibility that Jesus would rise from the dead. But when Jesus called her name, with just one word, Mary, everything changed. Mary immediately recognized Jesus and runs to hold on to him. And of course he says, no, you can't do that. I have work I yet have to do. But she goes back immediately and tells the disciples what she's been told to tell them by Jesus. When Jesus called Mary by name, if her life had been changed before, it certainly was going to change in a different way now. Because by calling her by name, some things happened that day. And I want us to think about how those changes in Mary's life can also be changes in our lives. Because the first thing that happened for Mary when Jesus spoke her name was that the resurrection was confirmed for her. Now, maybe she didn't realize that, but that's what happened. Because we have to remember that it was only the few days before that she had been at the cross and watched Jesus breathe his last breath, watched as a soldier pierced his side and his body was taken down and laid in a tomb. So there wasn't any doubt in Mary's mind, I would imagine, that Jesus had actually died physically. I mean, she had seen it. So when Jesus called her by name, there was only one possibility for Mary, and that was that Jesus was alive. So maybe she suddenly got what Jesus was talking about. And the scripture makes it clear that this is not just Mary imagining she hears Jesus' voice. It's not some ghost speaking to her, but a person is there. So the resurrection is made real by Jesus calling Mary's name. And then the next thing that happens when Jesus calls Mary's name is he creates now a whole new relationship with her. And I should say, for her. Because you see, we talk about this and we can kind of laugh as an aside, about the treatment of women, but this is really something that's vitally important for us to understand, is that when Jesus chose Mary to be the first one that he appeared to, it was significant in that history. But we also need to ask ourselves, and maybe these are questions you've asked, I would say, why didn't Jesus find a bigger crowd to reveal himself? I mean, why didn't he just go to all those people, that had been yelling and waving and Hosanna the few days before? Why didn't he go to the people that had been in the place where they had been yelling, crucify him? Or why didn't he go to the synagogue where the Jewish leaders were? Why, if he was only going to appear to one person, didn't he pick somebody like Caiaphas or Pilate or Herod? Or why didn't Jesus appear to Mary when the other disciples were there too, just moments before? He could have done all of those things, but Jesus was making a point. When he called Mary by name, he was saying that every person has worth, even if you're a woman. And no matter what your background is, and no matter where you come from or what your name is, no matter what, you are special. And everyone in the world would know that. In Jesus' eyes, Mary was significant because she was a person who had value simply because she was a child of God. And he wanted everyone else to know that. The third thing that happened when Jesus called Mary's name that day was that she had a choice how she could respond. We don't think about this, but she could have ignored Jesus. She could have said, I must be hallucinating or imagining things. She could have said, well, there's something there, but I don't think it's Jesus. So she could have doubted that it was Jesus. She could have outright rejected that Jesus was there and said, this has got to be something unexplainable in my mind. But instead, Mary that day chose to embrace Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that she understood everything that Jesus had been saying all these few years before and in the last few months of his life. And it isn't important that she got the whole picture. That's not what's important. But what is important is in that moment, she decided to believe that he had been raised from the dead. And from that moment on, her life would be changed forever. We all have the same choices that Mary had that first Easter morning. We can choose to ignore, we can choose to doubt, and we can even choose to reject Jesus. Because oftentimes we know it would be a lot easier. But I want you to think about the decision that you have made or will make, or that you will continue to make every day, because sometimes we doubt every day. That in choosing to follow Jesus, you have made a decision to listen to God speaking your name. Not that choosing to follow Jesus will put an end to all your troubles or that it will be an easy life. That's not what's guaranteed. But when you choose to follow Jesus, your heart will be changed. I think that's what was changed with Mary that day. And when you have a change of heart, you're never the same. Because when you have a change of heart, you have the reassurance that you are precious in God's sight. And you have a reassurance that you have a relationship that will stand the test of time, and you have the reassurance that you have a God that calls you by name, and that name is beloved.